Today, it's story time. So, something I get asked all the time is, why did I start Dry Out Daddy Restoration? And in this single video, I am going to formally tell this story. There's two situations that occurred in my life that got me on this path. First was a major flood in the condo that I was residing in. This flood was caused by a cooling tower water line for the AC system in the condo building. This line had broken between the first and third floor. I lived on the first floor. Therefore, we got the brunt of the water because water flows down. So I was doing a workout on a patio and I went in to get some water. I went back out, continued my workout, and I remember seeing water under my feet. And I was like, I went and got water and I probably spilled a little bit, but I didn't spill like that much, right? And I opened the front door and I will never forget the feeling of just, holy shit, there is so much water. Dude, it felt like I was in the Amazon rainforest. So I immediately opened the door, I slammed the door, and I ran to the front desk, and I went in and I was like, guys, you gotta cut the water, shut the building down, shut it all down. There is so much water in my unit right now. Anyway, long story short, it was clearly the HOA's fault. They took the blame and they hired a restoration company. Now, at this time, I knew nothing about restoration other than they brought in equipment, fans, and dehumidifiers to begin drying the structure out. Now, here's where it gets funny, is because at this time, I knew nothing about water damage. I knew a little bit about mold. I knew that it could affect you if you lived with it too long. I didn't have a full grasp on the water damage restoration process or anything. And frankly, it was kind of up to the HOA anyway. They basically, were dealing with it and it was a little bit out of my hands. Funny, because fast forward to when I began getting interested in this as a career path and whatnot, and I got certified and whatnot, I realized that restoration company that performed the dry out for my condo flood, they did it completely wrong. So we get back into our condo. Now, this is when, shortly after, I started experiencing issues taking full breaths. I couldn't fully get air. So like right now, it's not an issue, right? But at the time, living in that condo, before I would try to go to sleep and whatnot, I would, I found it hard to take full gasps of air. And this was actually a pretty scary thing because it was affecting me more and more. So I eventually went to a doctor and they did a quick evaluation and they didn't find anything. They were like, you're fine. They actually said that I probably had some form of anxiety. So I continued and I was like, well, maybe I'm just anxious or whatever. But the issue still persisted. But one thing I noticed is that whenever I left the condo for more than 30 minutes, I was able to breathe fine. And I kind of forgot about it until I went back into the condo. That kind of went on for a couple of weeks, right? And then it was summertime. At the time, I could work from anywhere. So we took a vacation to the state of Illinois. And during this period, no issues with breathing. It was like it hadn't even existed. As soon as I left the condo, I remember we were driving and we were in North Florida somewhere and I was breathing and I was like, and I remember saying something to my girlfriend, who's now my fiance at the time. I said, dude, I can breathe totally fine. Vacation was fun. We did all that. We came back from vacation. And this is where things started to get a little bit more serious. I'll never forget this night. We drove all day back to Florida, get back to the condo about 9 o'clock at night. And we open the door to the condo and it hits us like a ton of bricks. Just musty, moldy smell. It was so bad. And I just was like, hey, like, I think that this is a mold issue. I was like, this smells funky. And we start turning on some lights, and that's when I see that there's mushrooms growing from the baseboards of the bathroom and the kitchen. So it's a shared wall. So one side is the bathroom, the other side is the kitchen. And that's when I was like, this is weird. First I thought it was funny, and then I was like, wait, like mushrooms grow outside. Why would a mushroom be growing inside? I've actually never seen a mushroom grow inside. So I immediately hopped on Google, which took me to Reddit, which showed me a bunch of people's stories about what happened when they found mushrooms in their home. A lot of people said that if you have mushrooms growing in your home, this is very likely due to a serious moisture problem. And so I was like, well, if there's water here, I'll poke a hole through the drywall and we'll see if it's wet. So I remember grabbing a hammer. I went over there to the wall and I didn't even need to swing or anything. I literally just put the hammer through and it fell right through the drywall. The drywall was soaked. So all that being said, I started freaking out and I was like, wait, this is something. There's something here. This is not okay. So then I started taking drywall with my hands, and at this point I had no PPE on or anything, because like I said, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I had no idea about any of this really, other than what Reddit just told me. So I'm peeling this stuff off. I'm pulling the drywall off with my hands. It's just falling, and I see that the floor under this bathroom vanity is soaked. I remember I went to do something in the sink, and because I had already pulled out some of the drywall, I removed the toe kick of the vanity. When I ran the sink and I shut it off, I heard water trickling. And I was like, oh my gosh, the drain line for the sink is leaking. And this is interesting because it wasn't leaking under the vanity, right? So when you open the cabinets under the sink, there was no water there, it was dry. But this was happening behind the vanity, between the walls. And long story short, we ended up having to remove the vanity, remove the drywall. We had to remove a lot. Now, this ties into the first flood, because had the restoration company did a proper remediation during the big flood that we had, where there was hundreds of gallons of water, they would have detached the cabinetry, they would have cut the drywall, and they would have seen that pipe between the walls was compromised. And they would have been able to notify us so we could notify the landlords to fix it. So I ended up doing a lot of the work myself, and that is basically what got me interested in restoration and mold and water damage. And yeah, I just kind of did some research, and at the time in my life, I was kind of looking for a different career path. I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. When I went through the process of kind of DIYing it myself, I was like, wait a second, this is kind of cool. Like, I have a sense of accomplishment. I feel needed, I feel important, and I felt really good about it. And I was really into the fact that, like, you know, there's botanical solutions to remediating mold, there's harsh chemicals to remediate mold. And so, like, I think at the time I did a white vinegar solution, and then I scrubbed the studs. So there's a bunch of different things that I learned just on my own in that process. And I basically never stopped. I just kept going, and I remember just, you know, quitting my other job, and I was just like, look, I'm just gonna dive full into this and just immerse myself into the property damage restoration world. And I never looked back. As I was immersing myself in this field, you know, the reality is then this is something that I'm changing with Dry Daddy Restoration, but the reality is like if you're working as a technician, you really don't make great money, and it's hard to sustain just an average lifestyle on $18 an hour. And so, you know, I felt like I was better than most people. I had been through my own remediation. I had been doing research. I paid for my own certification, like felt really confident in myself. And I felt like, you know, Dry Out Daddy just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks one night. It just seemed like everything kind of fell in place for me to really pursue this as a full-time gig. And so I took a risk and I went for it. And that's how Dry Out Daddy Restoration was born. And that's, and I basically been running it ever since. We're going on 3 years now. And it's been nothing but a really fun, stressful at times, but fun ride. And I don't think I would have it any other way, truthfully. All that being said, that's the start and the story of Dry Out Daddy Restoration. Thanks for watching, guys.